www.consciouslivingradio.org. So welcome. I'm really excited about today. We talked last week a little bit. Marc and I were talking about the mystical healing experience, manifesting the miraculous, which is an event that's coming up in April, 23rd, 24th, online, where you get to experience some incredible speakers and also have a direct experience of something, which is my favorite, to be in my pajamas and be offered an opportunity to expand. Like, I don't know, doesn't get much better than that. Some of the people at that gathering will be Donald Neale Walsch. So Conversations with God. Did you read it, Marc?
I have not read it, no.
That was a pivotal book. That was a long time ago, before a lot of people, there was still this sort of idea that somehow the divine was outside of you. And Neale's book, Conversations with God, which if you guys haven't read, which I'm a bit surprised, you should, because it just normalized the relationship so much and made you recognize that we all have this ability to tap in and have, it's also very funny. Like, I remember when I was reading it, laughing my head off and going, this is so cool. This matches my idea of the divine. Anyway, Neale's there. There's also going to be Shaman Durek, Christy Whitman, and today's guest, Ken Stone, which, welcome to the show, Ken. Super excited to have you here.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let me introduce Ken. He calls himself the Soul Archaeologist. He's a world-renowned energy healer, a spiritual teacher, author, and founder of the Resonance Experiment. People say that when Ken sits with them in transmission, they experience the divine in their own bodies in a very unique way. And we're really excited that we're going to have a little transmission at the end of the show after we sort of explore today's topic, which is soul embodiment and spiritual healing. So we'll talk also about the event at the end. You can tell us your thoughts about what you're going to be offering there, Ken, but let's start with you, your personal story. I understand you were in finance. I love how people are just like living their lives and then this happened. And so I want to hear about how you came to work with energy, transmission, divine energy. What's your personal story?
Well, you know, a lot of people sort of fit into one of two groups that I've discovered who are energy healers, right? They were really excited about it and then they studied it, or they had a near-death experience or something like that. I can't say I fit into either of these exciting categories. It's a little disappointing in a way. I went to a meditation retreat, an in-resonance meditation retreat in the fall of 2007. And a fellow participant there, on the last day of the retreat, we were randomly paired. Of course, nothing's random. And we, in silence, we're closing out the retreat, going through this guided process. And in the middle of it, he whips out a piece of paper and writes on it, "You should be working as a healer." I didn't even know what the word healer meant. And I just started sobbing uncontrollably. And it might be difficult to tell, we're here on camera talking virtually, but I'm 6'5" and I'm a substantial presence. And when I fall apart and start crying, it's not subtle. And everyone had their cathartic moment during this in resonance retreat, including me. That was very normal. But here we are at the blissful end and the big guys in the back of the room falling apart. You know, what's going on? That was actually how I became aware of this. And then Lynn, it turns out I got to know him a little bit, but as we came out of silence, he said to me, "You're going to discover you've done this in many, many prior lifetimes, and this is more natural than breathing for you." And my thought, I started crying again, and my thought in my head was, where's the nearest psych ward? Like, what are you talking about? You know? And so that was the inception of, I guess, my conscious awareness. And then I began kind of exploring and sharing it a little bit after the first of the year in early 2008. Again, because I had a conversation with Lynn where he, in trance, said to me, or at least I heard him say, "You know what you're already doing. You don't need to be trained. Just go do it." And for some reason I thought, okay, I'll go do it. And I put my hands on somebody's head who had a headache, and my hands and feet started buzzing and their headache went away. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is so strange and wonderful. And that was sort of the beginning of the process for me.
Do you believe that we all can do this, tap into this?
Oh, for sure, without a doubt. It's not something that is unique to any particular human being. I think we all have an extraordinary, to say it's a connection with the divine is to minimize it. That's somehow to diminish how innate that is. I think we are all the undistorted expression of divinity. And one of the aspects of that expression, if you want to call it a healing gift or the ability to work with energy or whatever, however you want to refer to it, I think that's universal.
So what makes the way you support people unique? Is there something about your approach you think that's tangibly different?
Well, I'm not aware of how it's different. It's always reflected back to me.
Right.
For me, it's the same experience, and what changes is the individual or the group that I'm working with. And so if somebody's done a lot of spiritual work and I'm working with them one-on-one, I can usually tell sort of because of the stuff that comes into the queue, if you will, that's being addressed. But
whoa, what does that mean? Oh, you mean because you're talking, when you work one-on-one with someone, you're actually unpacking things?
Yeah.
It's different than when you're doing a group transmission? It's
actually, I'm wading into all sorts of detail here, aren't I? So what's different is, let's say that you and I are in transmission now, and the two of us are sitting together. We're obviously having a conversation, and presumably the conversation, if we're in session, is about something unfolding for you, right? And so what I'm aware of intuitively or on the screen, if you will, there are all sorts of different ways that I receive awareness or information about what's happening. That's all about you. When I'm working with a group, it's the collective. So I don't have an individual awareness of the people in the group. And in fact, I'm not aware of even the number of people. I'm aware of everyone who will ever participate in the group experience, ever. Because for me, it's happening outside of time and space,
Right.
if that makes sense.
It makes total sense.
Yeah. So when I'm in, I should back up for a second. So I never got trained. I just started doing this. Things just started happening, and people, I actually hid for quite a while. I put up a website, but I hid who I was. I got on Twitter, but nobody could figure out who I was. I was just trying to share, be able to give voice without, I was afraid I would be thrown in the asylum or something. I mean, seriously, I was really worried that something would happen and I would be fundamentally rejected from society. And mind you, I was a mortgage lender prior. So, this is sort of the rational world. You were in a narrow world. I was in a very narrow world, and now all of a sudden a very expansive world. And so people were finding me just because they talk to each other. And, quickly I'm working with people around the world, and it's all distance work and whatever. And so what those people were reflecting back to me was, something different is happening here than has ever happened before for me. And again, I don't think anything's random, but I wasn't out fishing I didn't even want to work with people after a while. I was like, this is crazy. It was actually very upsetting to me, because things were happening at a very deep and profound level, but I didn't understand it at all. It was like, how is this happening? How can I even be part of this? So one of the things that happened was, a lot of people had been advanced students of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And without me ever prompting them after the session, to a T, they all used the same words. That was the deepest spiritual experience of my life. And I didn't even sort of realize that. Like, I couldn't process that consciously for probably 5 or 7 years. And once I started realizing that, it helped me sort of understand the divine expression in each of us. That raw expression is always unique, because it's flavored in the way that the divine sort of built each of us. So to say that we're all capable of it, yes, is true. We all have an experience of, and the divine expresses in some unique way through each of us. The divine expression through you is unique. The divine expression through me is unique. So in that way, I think there is a unique experience happening. Beyond that, what is happening for the individual is very much about sort of what's in their queue energetically, spiritually, and so on. And I don't have any awareness of what that is ahead of time. And sometimes I'm aware of it consciously when we're working together, but often I'm not. I mean, I'll even be working with somebody individually and I'll make reference to something and they'll think can see or understand lots of detail about their life, but I'm just sort of getting what is necessary for me to be able to prompt to sort of open up. And I'm not even aware of how that process works, I guess. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
You know, you are, because I think it sort of resonates for me since I work with people. Tell me if this lands for you. I find it easier to get information that's helpful to other people than I do for myself sometimes. Do you find that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is almost a universal, right? Because when it comes to our own stuff, let's say, it's that we have all these attachments, right? We think, how is this going to turn out? Whereas when we're working with someone we don't know, you know, there's no attachment whatsoever, right?
And can you go a step, let's say, beyond attachment? Because to me, it's the sustainability. Like, I love a direct experience. I know what that is. I've had that. I yearn for it, but it almost feels like I'm yearning for banana cream pie, which you can't have on the daily, or, you know, at least there. I'm not sure how to sustain a vibration that's tangible. I can talk myself into, okay, I am still, you know, in this moment, I'm just connected with a person on the street. That is the divine coming through, but it doesn't feel like a direct experience does. So is it not meant to be sustained on a feeling level as humans? Or is there a way to invigorate one's system so it does? Does that question make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, here's the question I hear you asking. Is there a way to have an enlivened, direct experience of divinity on a sustaining basis?
On the daily, yeah.
Yeah. And I think there is a way to do that. But and sort of, for me, it calls forward, let's say, the core, if you will, practices of even just opening up for a mystical experience, for that direct experience of divinity. And one of those aspects that I think is particularly, I'll just say, it's challenging for me, and I notice for people I work with, there's some challenge associated with it, and that relates to surrender. A lot of us have a tendency to sort of think, I'm creating this life that I'm living. And that's true at one level of consciousness. But at least to my perception, if we move to a deeper level of consciousness, as we come to greater intimacy with the divine, that dynamic starts to shift. We subordinate ourselves to divinity. We open up to, if this doesn't sound heavy-handed, I certainly don't mean it, divine will, divine expression. There's something about coming into that dynamic that is very sustainable and that can continue. But the relationship between, let's say, the individual and their obligation or their participation, their role in that experience, it almost diminishes over time. And I think that's a function of integration. As the separate self integrates, we have this bigger experience, or this more complete experience of the whole self. And that whole self is really the enlivened divine, if you will.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I love it. I love that answer.
Yeah.
Okay, let's land in some specifics, because you use the word soul embodiment, which I love, because I'm all about embodiment. I think, you know, even with meditating to go trip off to some Zen mountaintop, it's like, that's great. What's the point? But bringing it in and offering it to the world, I'm assuming is part of it, your idea of embodiment. Why don't you define what is a soul and how one embodies it?
Yeah. So to me, the soul is the vector, the the method or the expression through which the divine enlivens the individual. And I perceive, although I recognize in some traditions the soul is not individuated, I mean it in an individuated way. So some people might be more comfortable with the term spirit, right? So
like your essence, you're talking about the individual energetic essence of that person.
Indeed, yes. The individuated expression of the divine as you, as me, as, and so in that, and if we talk about it in wholeness, we're all embodied, right? We're all fully integrated. It's already there, right? That's sort of one of the, I think, things that's sort of difficult to understand or wrap our minds around, right? We live our lives in this dynamic that's, sort of marinating in the illusion of separation. And from that perspective, the soul embodies and disembodies. And if I think we can all sort of recognize when we see people or notice people who are disembodied, because the light actually goes out of our eyes when we're disembodied enough, right? So if you think of like a family member or a loved one who was going through cancer or some traumatic experience, came back from a deployment in a war zone or something like that, that light tends to dim. And what I noticed over time, I think this is one of the things the divine does through me sort of automatically. It sort of took me a number of years to understand it and figure it out. But as I sort of connect in or move into transmission, there's this natural movement of the soul coming down in and home into the hips. And as it comes down, it enlivens every part of the being, not just the physical presence. But there are all sorts of things that are enlivened there, right? One of the things that's enlivened is all the stuff that's actually you, that's the undistorted expression of divinity as you. And another thing that's enlivened is all the stuff that's still held in separation. So you could think of it as past traumas or whatever. And so as the soul is embodying, what's happening then is that it's almost like the volume's getting turned up, right? Everything is being enlivened. And if we can sustain that dynamic, it will actually transmute everything that is not, let's say, you, right? Who you really are. And in that process, then the light shines more fully, and there are all these other wonderful sort of side effects that take place.
I love what you're saying, because that would mean that all this effort that so many people put towards trying to be better, to heal this, to heal that, it's the antithesis of what you're describing.
Exactly.
Right? You're talking about being with whatever's arising,
yes,
and letting it transform as you love it, not love it from an egocentric place, but from a whole place.
Right.
Then
exactly. So if you can allow, so this is sort of the opening, let's say, to the cosmology that has come to me through download and experience, right? Is that we're effectively uncovering what is already there, our inner wholeness. We're opening up. So we're not actually healing something in the sense that there's something we need to fix. There's nothing we need to fix, despite all of whatever these artifacts are that are going on in the body or the mind or in the outward expression of life.
What do you think the most important shift in perception? Is it this, or is there something else, or how would you articulate the most important shift in perception a person could make to surrender to this process, to accelerate this process you're describing?
Great question. It's from my perspective, it's the perceptual shift is experiential. So it's not. And this is another thing that I often, sometimes it can take a while for let's say students or people in classes I'm teaching to really understand what I'm trying to say, or what I'm trying to effectively communicate. It's not that we need to work on our minds to get a different mindset in place. It's that if we open to the experience that is already there as it blossoms within us, if we open to that visceral experience within our beings, that necessarily shifts on a perceptual level. And it's a profound shift. It's infinitely more profound than the shift difference, let's say, from somebody who thought about someday I'm going to fall in love, talk to friends, read books, here's what it's like to fall in love. And then they fell in love for the first time. And oh my gosh, they had an embodied experience of love that led to a totally different perception about what love is. It's the same as we open into this embodied experience of ourselves. And that's what leads to, I make a reference to it, or this is sort of a foundational reference for me, embodied knowledge. It's a different class of knowledge, right? It's a knowledge that's coming through an experience, a direct experience. And when that is the frame of reference, when that's the anchor point for, let's say, our spiritual journey or what's opening up in our lives, something profoundly different just doesn't just open one time. It's like, it's like a lotus flower that's just continually blossoming and opening and revealing more and more of its beauty, but it's all going on inside. And in that inner dynamic, now all of a sudden, with enough integration and embodiment, we start perceiving that in different aspects of our lives.
Yeah. And then there's the world, how one experiences the world. You were talking about when it first started to happen, you hiding out.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when we look, for many of us looking at today's world, you're receiving these downloads. They have nothing about sides. Nowhere in those downloads is it going, pick a side. It's the opposite, dissolve, because there are no sides.
That's right. That's right.
And yet, as a human being, this is a tough time to be on this planet. I find that extremely painful. I find it makes me want to pull away and go, I can't play your game, so I'm not sure how to be in this world anymore. Yeah.
I mean, what you're saying, I think, is so important. And I also think it's profound, because it's the evidence of, let's say, our integration is an internal dynamic, but often we want to look on the outside for evidence that we're making progress. And then all of a sudden what we discover are these polarities, which draw us into a dynamic that is not reflective of our most integrated, but actually of our least integrated, let's say, of those aspects within me that have yet to integrate. And then the question becomes, well, what do we do with that, right? Do we run out and yell and scream, or do we grab a hammer or an axe or a torch, or do we turn inward and sit with that? And for me, at least, the answer really falls into that last group. It's really about the profound container that we're living in right now. All of these things are being enlivened. It's the perfect time to be transmuting my noise, because there's so much showing up out here to push my buttons. And when I sit with those things in an embodiment practice, then they are transmuted. And what changes within me is that I have a different experience of that. And I'm no longer, my buttons aren't pushed anymore. Or if they are, there's more for me to integrate and so on.
And perhaps you are called to actually say something regardless of the reaction, because it's not about that, right? One speaks because you're being, again, informed to share what it is, as opposed to, well, I don't know, what would be the opposite? Not being embodied, what you would be?
It's such an interesting question, right? Because what is one speaking about, right? Even language itself is born of separation, right? So what is it that, let's say, an embodied messenger is being called to do? From my perspective, it's really about being, or even at a deeper level, existence, right? Maybe it's even just, we could think of it as witnessing or being in presence with. And sure, there could be things that are said and so on, but what's fascinating to me, and I can reflect on this in my own experience, I can remember times when I was speaking my truth, but it wasn't integrated, it wasn't embodied. And I was sure that when it was embodied and integrated, it would be the same truth. And it wasn't. It wasn't even close to it. In fact, I find, this is one of the points of evidence that I have plenty to go in my own integration. I got lots to say, but when I'm integrated, I don't really have much to say at all. It's just about being. And that innate connection is enlivened with everyone and everything. And that is a profound shift. And that is a shift that is, depending on one's integration and embodiment, it is a global shift, actually. It's not just something that's happening privately.
Well, and especially profound if you believe that part of your purpose or calling is to offer wisdom or to support or teach or whatever that is when it requires people, period.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes that state of being isn't about individual people. Anyway,
Right. Right.
so interesting.
It
Okay,
is fascinating.
resonance. Let's define what you mean by resonance.
You know what? Here's what I love about the word resonance. Resonance means whatever it means to you, right? But here's the thing, right? So somebody might say, here's a resonant idea. I'd like a good meal. I'm hungry. They might say, I want a glass of water. Or resonance is a feeling of peace that sustains. Or resonance is unconditional love or solitude. Or see, I don't know. And my idea of what resonance is changes all the time, right? I'm having a profound experience of resonance with you and your community right now. And I would have struggled to put it into words what that experience of resonance is, but my hands and feet are buzzing and tingling right now. That's an important part of my experience of resonance, but it's not something I would want to impose on anyone. That's one of the things that I think is so beautiful about the spiritual journey. If we, as messengers, if we can support others in coming to their own perspective, their own experience, their own relationship with divinity. And to me, the word resonance offers that. It doesn't impose anything. You get to define it. It's the same with dissonance, right? If we're going to talk about polarity, we don't have to talk about it as good and bad. I mean, if we just think about it musically, resonance is just as important as dissonance in music, right?
Yeah, right.
But if we think about it in our lives, we might think, well, this experience is a dissonant, so I don't want this anymore, but I want more resonance. Still, it gives us a wonderful way to have the conversation without a story attached to it, without having to make meaning beyond, without being invested in it.
Yeah. Although so for me, it's a texture almost. It's like it's a body sensation. It's it's not in my head at all.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. This is one of the things I love to do. I actually have interviewed a bunch of people. It'd be fun to interview you sometime if you're up for it. What I love asking people is, what does resonance mean to you? And then what do you imagine would happen if enough people were experience resonance on a consistent basis? And the conversations that come out of that are so fascinating. It's incredible. It's such a beautiful opportunity
Ken,
to learn.
what do you think would happen if enough of us were all resonant at the same time?
Way to turn the question on me there. You know, it makes me cry, actually. It just moves me so profoundly. It's the thing is, here's what I'm confident won't happen, right? It's not going to be a homogeneous dynamic. The divine whispers and works through each of us in very different ways. But if you just think about the way the body operates, right? Each part of the body has very, very different specialty and expertise, right? The heel doesn't smell, but it has a different experience of the ground and so on. And so I think as every aspect of the body of divine creation comes into resonance, something profoundly moving begins to open up within each aspect of the body of divine. In other words, within each of us individually and also within us collectively. And what's fascinating to me is that's already happening. That's true right now. The only thing that is sort of getting in the way of that experience for us as human beings is the illusion of separation. Right. And to my view, that is God's greatest gift to us. That is the most extraordinary gift that divinity has given us, because it's through separation that we discover, that we integrate, that we open to the experience of wholeness.
Do you think we chose all this? Do you think our souls, if you want to use that word, kind of set up our lives in a certain way?
Yeah, I think that makes sense to a certain degree, right? It's, to me, I've done, back at the beginning, I was part of a spiritual networking group and we did lots of trades and this kind of thing. And I went through a regression experience, and it was really fascinating to me to actually see some of those lifetimes sort of stacked up against each other without any obvious. The congruence there was about sort of learning and perspective rather than sort of increasing frequency, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so I think it's probably more complicated than maybe we can understand, but also, yes, very much part of a choice, an opportunity to integrate. I think the soul is going through an experience of integration just as we are within the context of the lifetime. And so there are certain things that are showing up to be integrated, let's say for me in this experience, that are likely different than those experiences that I've had in the past. Although I really think they're all happening concurrently. So
And is that what you mean when you say in the queue? Is that
yeah,
like the next
yeah,
piece, the next piece, the next
yeah,
piece?
yeah,
To me,
yeah,
they're like
yeah.
ready and waiting.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
next.
yeah. And the
Yeah,
more we integrate, I think these timelines just all start to collapse into one. And
yeah,
in that fully integrated experience, we start having, I mean, there's just an even more extraordinary opening into, let's say, embodied resonance, and the stuff that shows up to be transmuted also doesn't necessarily fit within this lifetime
yeah,
narrative, which
yeah,
can be
yeah.
kind of fascinating.
I love the metaphors that people see. So you're seeing this lineup, and I always see not always, but one of the ones that I gravitate towards, especially when I'm feeling too swirly, is a ball, like a ball of yarn, tightly,
Uh-huh.
tightly.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
go, if I can
yeah,
just grab the one
yeah,
thread and
yeah.
breathe, that's it. It will
Yeah,
unravel
yeah.
itself. And in the center is
Brilliant.
this delicious jewel, actually. In mine
Yeah,
is there's
yeah,
always, you know,
yeah,
a gemstone that's a
yeah,
treasure
yeah,
through once I go through all the feelings. But I love
yeah,
that. I love how the mind, the unconscious, talks in metaphor. And I
yeah,
guess the divine resonates on that channel for me. I know I'm
yeah,
not in my head when
yeah.
I'm on that channel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think one of the hallmarks of people that are in a fully integrated experience is the story, if you will, becomes a metaphor.
Yeah.
There's no way to speak directly, let's
Yeah.
say, in stage 4 consciousness. It's
Right.
just, but we can in the earlier stages, in those developmental stages, we have no option, let's say, or the metaphors are very limited. Whereas the metaphor is in an integrated experience, resonate at every stage of consciousness. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I really would love to invite you to share with our
Oh,
listeners
I
a
would love that.
direct transmission. So, first of all, really important, if you're driving in your car,
Yes.
please pull over for like 10 minutes or less, but pull over because you'll
Please.
want this experience. If you're listening and you've been, it's been resonating for you, you want the experience. So find a spot. We're going to talk for a second before we start, so you can actually find a good little parking spot, turn your car off, or if you're cold, leave it on. But regardless, don't be driving. Ken, you were saying that when you go into these direct transmissions, people can tune out. So we really, really, really don't want you behind the wheel of a car. Right?
Yeah, a buddy of mine years ago said, "You're going to be known as the boring guru because you put people to sleep, Ken." And I thought it was hilarious, and he thought it was hilarious.
Unless they've
Yeah,
got insomnia, then they will be.
I think they kind of get excited anyway, because the thing is, when you open into that level of consciousness, you're doing really deep work, but it is a challenge if you're driving a car. So no matter how integrated you think you are, please pull over to the side of the road, because you just don't know when that's going to happen or if it's going to happen, and we don't want you to hurt yourself or anyone else.
Okay, so why don't you lead us into this, and
Beautiful.
then we'll talk some more after.
Sounds great. Well, if it's comfortable, I would just invite everyone who is listening and participating in this experience to close your eyes and breathe in and out through the nostrils with your palms to the sky, if it's comfortable for you. And let's just take a deep breath in and hold. And release. And as you let go of this breath, I just invite you to let go of everything that has come before in this day, all the way out to the count of 8. It doesn't matter how resonant or dissonant the day has been, just let it all go with the breath. And another deep breath in and hold. And again, release this breath out to the count of 8. This time, just invite you to let go of everything that has come before since you were born, all the way out to the count of 8. And one last breath in, hold. And as you release this breath now, letting go of everything that has come before since the inception of your soul, all the way out to the count of 8. And whether the words that I use or make reference to make sense to you or not, nothing that's going on is connected to the words. The words are here just to invite your mind to engage. So if they don't make sense, you can just let them go. Sometimes people describe what sounds like shamanic drumming when I'm talking, or going underwater and losing the sound. Just go with the experience, whatever it is. I promise you'll come back when we're done in just a couple of minutes. For whatever remains in separation, I invite you to remove the universal plug. I'll do the same. And with your permission, let's begin. 7. One of the things that can happen as you embody your soul is that it might feel like gravity is being turned up. 6. And that's very normal. It might be a feeling that you might normally associate with something that's not so resonant. And I'd invite you here just to be with whatever comes up. 5. And if there's discomfort in the body or the mind or in any part of your awareness or being, instead of trying to suppress it, if you're ready to, I invite you to feel it. Feel it like it's something that's never going to end. In other words, you're not trying to get somewhere or diminish it. Just let it come in and express fully. Even if it's discomfort in the body or an unhappy memory or tears or laughter, anything, whatever it is, and it could be nothing. You might be feeling absolutely nothing. Whatever is coming up for you is perfect. 4. You can't mess it up. There's literally nothing you can do wrong. And in the same way, there's no right way to do it. Just whatever is okay for you, whatever feels okay, whatever you're willing to open to, that's perfect. 3. Sometimes there are sensations that start moving through the body, buzzing, tingling, warmth. Again, if those things are happening for you, perfectly normal. And if they're not, no big deal. 2. Just let your breath move however it will. If there's something coming up that feels a little bit stuck, just follow along in your awareness. With each breath, you are connected to every part of your being. And the breath you breathe comes from the breath of the planet, which serves and supports everyone and everything. And in that way, you are connected to everyone and everything. And the breath of the planet eventually becomes the breath of the cosmos. For at the very edge of our atmosphere, that breath connects to space and every other aspect of the cosmos, including that energy that underwrites and expresses in, through, and as everyone and everything. The divine, a light, one, drawing closer with each breath until eventually it's close enough that you can perceive the twin frequencies which together express as the light, perfect health, and the divine itself, intertwined such that there is no separating one from the other. One. Eventually, that light comes and connects into each aspect of your being, known and unknown. It invites each aspect of you to return to its natural state of alignment and resonance. One. And with that, the artifacts of dissonance fall away and are transmuted to express completely and entirely as the light, the undistorted expression of the divine as each aspect of you, known and unknown. Indeed, the divine is becoming you, and you are becoming the divine. I can feel the collective here settling in at a deeper level, and I just want to check in and see if there's anything coming up for you that you'd like to reflect on or ask about or give voice to, Tasha. We can stay in this space if you want, or we can wrap up whenever you'd like.
I do have one question, but I want to keep feeling it. So I'm seeing this strand of DNA twisting, and it came up when you talked about there not being separation between the physical and I can't remember what you called your words were for the divine. Do you get any information about that?
I often see those twin frequencies as a strand of DNA. Isn't that interesting that you're seeing that? Not surprising, I suppose. Yeah.
So in terms of, if you can just touch on physical illness and how this kind of transmission can support healing.
Yeah. So think of it this way. Here we go, dropping down deeper and deeper within. As we come to a more embodied experience, the light, divine presence is shining through each aspect of us fully without any distortion. And the byproduct of that is what we would think of as healing. So healing can happen it can be a spontaneous dynamic. It's entirely a function of what is integrated and embodied. And so we can, and if you think about that DNA strand that you're seeing, at least how I perceive it, is these two strands of energy, right? One is the frequency of perfect health, the other divine. They're intertwined. There's no separating one from the other. They are everywhere. There is no place they are not. And if we just look inside, forget the rest of the world for a moment, just be within. That's true for every aspect of your being expression, known or unknown. And it's not true because we believe it or we want to believe it. It's a fact. And actually, that's what I perceive when I'm in transmission with a group or an individual. All I perceive is that light. And you could say, as I perceive that, eventually that people start having an experience of that. And over time, and it can happen very, very quickly, over time, things begin shifting profoundly.
Do you want to bring us back?
Sure. When you're ready, I invite you to return the universal plug. I'll do the same. And I'm going to bring this transmission to a close. Just, if you can, just be within yourself. Try to give yourself a little bit of space. Sometimes it can be helpful if you're going to drive, especially maybe turn one of your palms down. Let's go with the left palm down and just sit there for just a little bit, so that in the transition back into eventually, when you're ready, eyes open, you can be interacting with every part of the world, including the interior where you have been so beautifully. Thank you for the opportunity to share this with you.
Oh,
in your
Ken,
community, Tasha.
thank you. That
What a
was
gift.
lovely. That was lovely. The next question I have is about that strand. In other words, just because my eyes are open, and so I'm back kind of at that original question of, how do you sustain this? I mean, I don't think you have to be in a meditative state to feel that union.
No, you don't.
Right. And so the
right.
beauty is, for me anyway, you offered me a tangible, visual and kinesthetic experience that I want to keep alive. Like, I love that. I just love it. It does ease my conscious mind, because my mind does love doing. Most people's do.
Sure.
And that does, it means feel that, see that, sense that, lean into that. And that's enough. So I'm thrilled. That was lovely. Thank you.
Beautiful. It's an
I just
honor.
wanted to chime in too a little bit. As soon as you got from 7 to 6, I felt my crown totally open, and it all tingles. And that's usually what happens with me when there's an activation of some sort. It usually starts at the crown and it just opens up. And like you, when you described how I had an experience in 2007, and ever since then, whenever I just sit, and I could be anywhere, sit silent and quiet, and all of a sudden my palms and my feet just start tingling. And I had that whole same experience just wash over me as you were guiding us through. So thank you for that.
Oh,
my hands are frozen. I got to do something about that. I've got ice hands, like just crazy.
Yeah, I have a client in Europe that I've worked with one-on-one for years and years, and she has to bundle up, like wear blankets and stuff, because she gets so cold as she drops in deeper and deeper.
Tell us about this universal plug, because that's not a term I am familiar in. I'm familiar with plugging in above and below, but when you talk about you plug this in, then you unplug. So tell me what you're talking about, because I don't really want to unplug.
Just to be aware, guys, not to interrupt, but we got about 5 to 7 minutes to wrap up.
Okay, so we'll move on. If you answer that, and then we'll move into the event.
I'll try to answer it succinctly. Here's the quickest answer I can give you. It showed up intuitively for me at the beginning, and it is, as long as something remains in separation, intuitively in my awareness, it looks like an important part of the experience of being in transmission. It also serves as a wonderful demarcation at the beginning and close of transmission. And what people who fall asleep find is that they may drop out at remove the universal plug, but they will always hear me say return the universal plug as I bring the transmission back to a close. That's the quickest answer I can give you. And I realize it's a non-answer. I don't have a succinct answer in the time that we have left here, but I'd love to share more in another conversation another day.
Well, we'll have one all about the plugging
There you
in,
go.
and do you have to really, do you really have to unplug?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the event. First
Sure.
of all, it is, again, the dates are April 23rd, 24th. It's happening
Yes.
in Tucson, so it's a live event.
Yep.
And I love that we can do this online, that people from all around the world can join you for those 2 days.
Yeah.
And everybody has a focus of healing, but also an experience. So it's not just words, right?
Yeah, and so many different perspectives, you know, just like you get anytime spiritual messengers get together, there are all these wonderful perspectives, all these different expressions of divine gifts showing up in these different ways, different insights with words, different experiences. And as you say, the ability to participate virtually is such a critical piece. I love being able to work virtually. I think it's a wonderful way to connect with the international community and for people to be able to participate in a way that makes sense for them and be part of this experience that's going to be unfolding in Tucson.
What's your focus going to be, and what's your hope in terms of touching the collective?
You know, for me, I think there's always a focus on embodiment, and from a collective dynamic, my hope is that whatever comes out, whatever the experience is, that a more intimate experience and relationship with divinity begins to unfold on an experiential level for everyone who participates. That's always my wish.
And you know what occurs to me? I mean, I do think we are being called into service at this time on the planet. And I can't think of a better way to do that than to spend 2 days receiving information and being in touch with our own divinity as a starting place to then know what our purpose is in the world and how are we meant to walk that. And again, the fact that you can do it from your own living room on your computer and align yourself with your purpose, it just blows me away. I think it's super exciting.
I'm excited about it too. It's a real honor to be part of it. As you mentioned, the lineup is full of some stellar spiritual messengers. I think one of the other things that is really interesting, just in line with what you're talking about, is I really believe we're all spiritual messengers. I believe we're all embodied messengers. And by that, I mean, we have the ability to share the divine expression as us merely by our presence. Yeah. And one of the things that happens when we get together in community is that whatever is being said with words, there is a deeper transmission unfolding and divinity is being enlivened. And we never know how that's going to happen and where that's going to lead us. It's when we engage in these opportunities that we open more to that mystery. And I think this is really a powerful opportunity to do that.
How long will your transmission be? Will you go even deeper than we just did?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, I think I've got 90 minutes or something like that. And someone will have to wrestle me off the stage at the end of it. At the beginning, I was thinking, here we go. Yes, I want to make sure I'm honoring and respectful, but for sure, yeah, we'll drop in deep and there'll be an opportunity for Q&A and really an opportunity to have a profound experience and conversation about what's unfolding.
Do you know if our online participants will also have places to put questions so they can be?
I don't know for sure. That's a great question to ask Dan. Dan is the promoter of the event. I would love for that to be the case. I love working with audiences in person and virtually, and I'm familiar with both, obviously, and I would certainly welcome that. And so that's something I'll forward on to Dan and make the request. Right. I think it's a wonderful.
What I do know is that they will be broadcasting the live stream via Zoom. So people will be in a Zoom room and they'll have a moderator who will be able to bridge the chat with Zoom to the main room.
Perfect.
So, beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful. So I would guess there will be an opportunity because there'd be somebody there to give voice to what those comments are and so on. That's very helpful. Thanks, Marc.
So April 23rd, 24th, if you feel like getting on a plane and going to Tucson, do it. If not, even easier, stay in your jams and do it from home. I know we're offering a discount code on the website, consciouslivingradio.org. there's probably a link. Marc, you're so brilliant with this stuff.
There's a link there that gives you an automatic discount depending how you choose to navigate it. Use the discount code CLR for Conscious Living Radio, and you'll save 20% as
and
a
it's super
community member.
reasonable to begin with. So it's well worth a weekend. It is a weekend, right?
Yeah,
23rd,
it is.
24th.
Yep.
Yeah. What could be better? Thank you, Ken. So loved having you on the show. It's really been a privilege. Thanks.
Honor to be with you. Thank you so much.
Okay. And thanks everyone for joining us. ConsciousLivingRadio.org is the website for podcasts after. Listen to the show Wednesdays, 6 to 7 p.m. on 100.5 FM in Vancouver.